Members, let's start the FC meeting. I call the meeting to order. We have one session today till 5 o'clock. In relation to the agenda items, since the Appropriation Bill 2014 has not been carried, so we're not going to deal with items 1, 3, and 7. As usual, when it comes to monetary pecuniary interest, let me remind members that if there are any direct or indirect pecuniary interest involving you and the discussion items, please declare the nature of the interest before you speak as per Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedure. And I draw members' attention to Rule 84 of the ROP in relation to the rules and regulations related to voting where there is direct pecuniary interest. Now we discuss item FCR 2014-15, number 2. Is PWSC bracket 2013-14, number 38. This is to upgrade part of 747CL to Cat A at an estimated cost of 340.8 million in money of the day prices. Is in relation to the Kutong North and Fanling North NDA new development area in relation to the detailed design and site investigation for the advanced site formation and engineering infrastructure works. On the 2nd of May, this committee has started the discussion. We have with us Under-Secretary for Development, Mr. Eric Ma, Principal Assistant Secretary for Development, Mr. Michael Chan, Project Manager, New Territories North and West, CEDD, Mr. Wong Ming To, Assistant Director Development, CEDD, Mr. Tang Wai Leung, Chief Engineer, Project Division 2 of CEDD, Mr. Lawman Tim, Assistant Director for Planning, Mr. Jacinta Wu, and Assistant Director of Social Welfare, Ms. Cecilia Lee. On the 14th of May, Mr. Albert Chan sent me a letter. He expressed his desire to move a motion under paragraph 13 that Rule 13 of the FC rules, in that I should not chair the meeting. Let me repeat to you that on the meeting on the 2nd of May, I clearly pointed out that I have carefully considered Rules 83A and 84 of the ROP, that is, in relation to disclosure of pecuniary interest and the rules related to voting. I have decided that I don't have any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in relation to this item. There is nothing for me to disclose. And I've also pointed out in the last meeting that I am one of the independent non-executive director of SmartTone, which is one of the subsidiary companies of Sun Hung Kai. There is no information showing that SmartTone will obtain any direct or indirect pecuniary interest in the NTNE development, and I do not have any information related to this project of Sun Hung Kai, although despite the fact that Sun Hung Kai has development projects in NTNE, I don't see that how SmartTone can in any way obtain direct or indirect pecuniary interest from this project. According to Rule 45 of the Finance Committee, Mr. Chan said that I should not participate in any voting. Even when there is an equal and when there is a tie and I have to cast a deciding vote. And in that case, I should cast a vote in a way that is against the supposed interest. So there is nothing irregular in my chairing the meeting, and there are no regulations and rules banning chairman of the FC from chairing the meeting. Since Mr. Albert Chan moved the motion asking the committee to decide whether I can chair the meeting, I will defer this matter to the committee for their decision. If the motion is endorsed, this item will be chaired by the deputy chairman. I will first ask Mr. Albert Chan to move his motion and speak on it. After Mr. Chan has spoken, I will ask other members to speak once, limited to 3 minutes. After members have spoken, I will ask Mr. Chan to make a concluding remark of 2 minutes. Then this will be put to a vote. Mr. Chan, I think this is whether you should. We should first decide whether there is any direct interest between you and this item. Shouldn't this part be chaired by the deputy chairman? In accordance with the rules and the ROP, I leave the matter to the committee. This is in relation to the saying from Mr. Chan that the chairman, in deciding whether the motion is when dealing with Mr. Chan's motion, I should not chair the meeting. Well, this is the motion from Mr. Albert Chan that the chairman cannot chair the meeting in relation to the funding allocation. Should this be put to a vote? Well, you will have to let us speak. It's very clear. It's not clear. This is just a simple question whether the chairman should chair the meeting or not. Including Mr. Chan, they all said that they are very clear about this. I'm now dealing with Mr. Chan's motion. That is, the chairman cannot chair the meeting when dealing with Mr. Chan's motion. It's a very simple suggestion. We leave everything to the committee. I don't want to start a discussion. This is just a little bit of time to explain to the public. You know, I know, but the general public, 7 million people, may not know. If you're not clear about this, put your hand up. This is a point on procedure. Well, I now am confused. Can I ask Mr. Chan to write it on a piece of paper? No, he's not talking about this. He's talking about something else. He asked the chairman not to chair the meeting. Let me repeat that Mr. Chan thinks that it's better for someone else to chair the part dealing with Mr. Chan's motion. I leave it to the committee. And you can put it to a vote or put your hands up. I am puzzled. I am confused, Mr. Chairman, from your words. Write it on a piece of paper, please. Mr. Chan, could you please write it on a piece of paper? Let me say it. It's very simple. You may recall, Chairman, that when it comes to election of chairman, the most senior member will chair the meeting, and if that member is interested in running for a chairman, that member would ask someone else to chair the election of committee. Mr. Chan, you should understand that now we do have a chairman. I think the question is whether for the time being it should be handled by someone else. You are talking about election of chairman when there wasn't one. The public are very clear and they are not confused. If Mr. Yu wants to see it black and white, well, we now put it. Well, I'll ask the Secretariat to help us. Yes, point of order. What's the point of order? Two things, Mr. Leung. One is related to you. There is conflict of interest. Should you excuse yourself? I have already read out the rule. Please respect me. I have not finished. But I have heard you. You should not interrupt me. It's my time.
I've heard you and I'm responding. But how can you respond when you haven't heard me? Well, you're aware of what I'm talking about? Yes. You say I'm not suitable to chair the meeting. Now, Mr. Leung, the rule of procedure, which one are you referring to? Well, first of all, the second rule of procedure question is that even if Mr. Albert Chan has a written motion, I would like you to provide us time to discuss before of taking a vote. Otherwise, I think it's not fair. You're not respecting the procedures. Okay? I will decide later. You are just raising an opinion. I'm collecting your opinion. Your rule of procedure, it isn't a rule of procedure. You're just asking how we're going to deal with the problem. Well, if that's not a rule of procedure, then what is it? Well, then which rule are you referring to? Which rule are you referring to? Well, the public can read his resolution here, his motion, and if you're not clear, you can have Mr. Albert Chan, and Mr. Yu, if you're still not unclear, you can have him explain his motion. Could you hand it to the secretary? Let's handle it according to procedure. Okay, we'll now take the signed motion and project it on the screen. If there's still any area that is unclear, Mr. Albert Chan can explain. We're talking about, well, we don't need to handle this item in this way. we still have an opportunity for you to raise your views. Okay? Let me read it out. I request that in handling my request to stop the chairman from chairing the meeting, this meeting should be convened by the deputy chairman or other person. I have actually submitted a letter on why I wish him to stop convening the meeting. When you ask someone to stop chairing a meeting and he is handling this withdrawal, you don't understand? We should understand. A lot of rules of procedure involve a challenge on the chairman's eligibility. You will be given an opportunity to explain. Well, I believe this arrangement is not a first, including if there's a discussion regarding the chairman. And I'm telling you that I'm following previous practice, and I'm telling you very simply what this motion is, and we should not be wasting our time. If there is no question, then I'll put this to the vote before we enter any discussions. Well, this arrangement, you're saying it's long-standing practice. Well, I would like the Secretary to provide some facts. Do we have any precedents? Anything that the Secretary would like to add? Well, please pause. Chairman, members, just now the chairman had said that there isn't any written provision stopping a chairman, him from chairing a meeting when there is a pecuniary interest or conflict of interest. Usually this will be handed back to members for handling and voting. So Mr. Albert Chan has put forward a specific motion, and the discussion now is whether this part should be chaired by the deputy chairman. Well, the normal procedure would be to have members decide and discuss. Well, in my memory, a lot of times there's a discussion and there would be a vote taken. That means there's no precedence. I'm not saying there's no precedence. Just now we heard you. You said that there was this precedence in the past, and there was such an arrangement in the past, including the chairman having. Well, I would like to ask the Secretary, are there facts? I just want to know if there are facts. Well, the Secretary did not provide facts. They just described some. I would like you to provide facts. Could you read it out to him? I'm talking about facts, not the contents of the provision or the regulation. I don't want a description. I want a case, facts. I'm saying that, well, I want the Secretary to clarify that. Mr. Chen Gamlam. Chairman, I think we're dealing with a rules of procedure matter of chairman chairing a meeting. So we should not be debating what was done in the past and what should be done now. Well, since chairman, you have already decided to let members decide, I think Mr. Albert Chan's motion should be put directly to the vote and to decide whether you should chair this meeting. Chairman, I'm not debating. You made a ruling. I'm just questioning that ruling. You have to tell me what was your basis for that ruling. And then I'm going to repeat to Mr. Leung, please pause. I'm saying that this I had already said that there is nothing wrong with me chairing this item, and I have the right to submit it to members' decision. So, if you have any specific provisions in the rules of procedure where you are not in agreement, you can raise your views. Otherwise, we will have members to vote on. What rules of procedure are you referring to? Any motion being put to the vote without discussion. Well, I'd like to ask you, I think we should discuss. Mr. Rules, Chen Gamlam, who wants to put it to the vote. Mr. Leung, please be seated. Well, any suggestion? As chairman, I've already collected these views, and I've made a decision to let members vote on whether we should have discussions. I don't wish to repeat the same discussion. Ms. Emily Lau, Chairman, that we have a motion in front of us, and there should be a discussion and then submit it to members for discussion. Why don't you give us time to discuss? You cannot take this debate discussion time scrapped. Well, which rule requires discussion? Well, the legal advisor is sitting right next to you. Well, what authority allows him to nix all discussion time? Legal advisor, one issue at a time. I hear you. Ms. Mo, well, which rule are you referring to? But we heard the secretary say after discussions, then a poll would be taken. You can listen to the recording. That's what he said just now. Could you wait? We'll now hear from our legal advisor. Legal advisor, for reference. Chairman, just now, the issue raised was, according to rules of procedure, and I think it's the Finance Committee procedure regarding certain motions that do not need a discussion and can be put to the vote, put to the vote directly. Typically, unless members agree, there will be some discussions before voting. Now, it seems that the chairman it's regarding Mr. Albert Chan's motion whether chairman should chair the meeting. This is a discussion topic. If I understand correctly, the chairman has decided to let members decide. So procedure-wise, we are now in the midst of this process. That is whether chairman should convene and chair this meeting to deal with Mr. Albert Chan's motion. The secretary had also provided past cases. The chairman or the council chairman well, he cannot stop people from debating. He says the rules of procedure doesn't say there's a time for debating. Well, I'm now handing it to members whether there is a need for discussion. I think I've repeated that more than once. Do we need discussion? Let members discuss it. Well, this is a simple motion. Please refrain. Just now, Ms. Emily Lau asked the legal advisor, but you have not responded to the legal advisor's comments. We want you to resolve this legal issue. That is, when a motion is raised, does the chairman have the right to disallow members from discussion and put it to a vote immediately. Well, we want to hear the legal advisor. Does the chairman have this power? Legal advisor? Chairman, my understanding is that regarding this motion, you had suggested members should decide whether there would be a discussion and then a vote. Well, we are now in the midst of this procedure. So that means we can discuss. I repeat once again, I hope you don't have any misunderstanding, or that is regarding whether I should chair this section, including the black and white motion. Does this need to be debated and discussed? I now hand it to the whole plenum. I'd like to hear from James Tien, Chairman. If we only have this motion, there should be a discussion, but given that Mr. Albert Chan, the contents of his motion are very detailed, we should be allowed to discuss. So I feel that at the very least, we need to know how to vote, and we don't need to vote on that. So we've heard the different opinions. I think it's clear that we have different views on whether we need to discuss. And I would like now to defer to members according to 71(5)(b). I will handle it. I have a full basis for handling this. If there's any inappropriateness, the secretary or legal advisor can provide their input. I need to respond. We're not debating. We need to handle, and I've already proposed how to handle that, and I suggest that through members you can make the final decision.
I leave it for the committee to decide whether we will have a discussion on this motion. Please do not waste time of the public. But it's really confusing. I don't know what we're voting on. We're talking about whether there should be a debate or not. It's very simple. Whether there is a need for debate. Some people think there is a need. Someone else made it very clear. Write it. Write it down. I believe it's very clear. I am not clear whether there is a need for discussion. If you're not clear, then you don't have to vote. What? I asked for it to be written out. I was asked to write it down. I did. I now ask you to write it down. We have to debate on whether there is a need, whether we need to debate on it. Sorry, speakers of mic. If we need to adjourn for this, well, it will be endless. I don't think you can handle this like this. Please respect yourself. I'm a chairman, I think. I think you need to adjourn for 5 minutes to coordinate everything. There are many different views. I don't want to waste your time. Let me make a decision. But if necessary, it can be put on the screen by the clerk. Do we need to have a discussion on this motion? I heard a proposal from the legal advisor. There are requests for an adjournment. For a break. Well, we will have a discussion. It's a very simple question. Do we need a discussion or not? Don't go off on a tangent. Who would like to have a discussion? Press the button. Who would like to speak? You may now make a request again. Discussion on the motion. You see the motion on the screen. This is about a discussion on this motion here. Dr. Fernando Zhang, 3 minutes. Let us clarify what we're discussing about. Are we discussing? If you don't even know what we're discussing about, I hope that you should focus your comment on whether there is a need for discussion. There is a need for discussion because we're talking about a solemn rule. That is, in a finance committee, when a member moves a motion, whether the chairman has the authority to say that the motion should be voted on without a discussion. I think this is about a solemn meeting procedure. If the chairman has a power to say that the motion should be put to a vote without discussion, is serious. We're now having a discussion. Well, I'm telling you that is very important. We don't accept what you propose, because if we set a bad precedent, and in future meetings this will be cited, and we'll be tying our hands. Well, I leave it to the committee. I did not say that we can't have a discussion. Now, I don't want to have a dialogue with you, but indeed you said that in relation to Mr. Albert Chan's motion, there is no need to have a discussion. We should put it to a vote straight away. That's why a lot of members wonder whether you have the power to do that. Let me answer you again that I leave it for the committee. That's what I said from the beginning. Well, if it's for the committee to decide, we will have to have a discussion first. But you keep saying that it should be put to a vote without any discussion, and then you said that there is no right for discussion. Well, I already said that I will leave it to the committee. I don't want to have a dialogue with you. I just want to say my piece, but you keep responding to me. I want to make it very clear that my understanding of the rules of procedure is that when a motion is moved, we can have a discussion. And if members request a discussion, we should have a discussion. The chairman should not say that the motion is to be put to a vote straight away without a discussion. Mr. Tam Yu Chung. Generally speaking, when dealing with a motion, yes, there will be a discussion. But as Mr. James Tian said, this is about whether the FC chairman should be chairing the meeting. So if you say that there is no need for a discussion, it won't be a problem. But some members insist on speaking. Maybe they will be given a limited time to speak before we put this to a vote. Otherwise, as chairman, you said that we will be spending time on arguing about this, and it's meaningless. In the end, it's for the committee to decide. Mr. John Smock. We should not have a direct discussion, dialogue. And it should be the chairman who upholds this rule, and unfortunately it's you, chairman, who keeps engaging in a direct dialogue. You keep saying that it should be done for the public. And this is indeed what we're doing. We're dealing with a very serious issue, conflict of interest, and whether you should be the chairman. And what you show to the public is that you have all the say. You say you leave it to the committee, and you know full well that there are enough loyalist votes to do what you want. You see, there are many students upstairs, so you have to bear in mind what you're doing because it will be seen by them. You keep talking about a backlog, but you have wasted 40 minutes on this. I don't want to waste time. I want to use my time to discuss the agenda items. But what you have done infuriates the moderates. We should have a discussion. And do not bend meeting procedures and rules as you like it, and then say that we'll leave it to the committee when you know full well that you have control over this meeting. Let's refer to 37 and 37A of the FC procedure. It says that subject to the decisions of the committee made from time to time, rules 29 to 35 of the rules of procedure shall apply with necessary modifications. If we look at 37A, well, if this is, let's see if it's an agenda item or not. If it's an agenda item, then we would decide whether it's related to the agenda item. Before the item is put to a vote, we need to decide whether this is related to the agenda item. If the motion is not related to the agenda item, there is no need to deal with it straight away. Let's ask the legal advisor. And what the chairman said was right, because when it comes to all motions, it has to be presented in written form. And when it comes to members or anyone having to excuse themselves in any meetings or in court, when someone points out that the judge should not hear the case, then the judge will make a decision. And if there are any consequences subsequent to the decision made, then the judge will have to shoulder all the responsibility. And I'd like to hear from the legal advisor. This is about procedure. I'd like to defer to the clerk. In relation to 37A of the procedure, this is in relation to letting members speak on an agenda item. And if members would like to say something, under 37A, members may move a motion without notice. And what we're dealing with here now is not related to the agenda item. And unless it is what I just mentioned, there is a need to give notice. And now, then that goes back to the original motion that the chairman should not chair the meeting related to the NTNE project. That is related to an agenda item. Well, 37A is in relation to an agenda item of the FC, but 37 is talking about the committee. Doesn't specifically mention an agenda item. What is stated in 37A is an agenda item. If you refer to 22, that an agenda item is a discussion paper. Is usually from the administration. Next, Mr. Leung Kwok Hong. Well, of course, we cannot discuss about the right of discussion, because if we discuss the right of a discussion, this will go endless. So the right to discuss should not be discussed. So the best approach is for you to ask members if they would like to express their views, ask them to press a button, draw a line. The right to discuss should not be discussed, but now you're discussing it. So that, well, it's just like you don't have to discuss about the right to eat. So ask members if they would like to speak and draw a line. Next, Mr. Chen Kam Lam. I think this is about the rules of procedure and not related to the agenda items of the FC. Just now, the legal advisor said that the chairman left it to the committee. And there is no need for a discussion. We're talking about conflict of interest under 83A and 84. And these are the two rules that are related. Chairman, you are elected by members of the FC, so you have the right, you have the power to chair the meeting over all the items on the agenda. Now a member moves a motion saying that you should not chair the discussion of a certain meeting is not related to the agenda. There is no need to have a discussion, and if you think it should be put to a vote, then it should be put to a vote straight away. It's very clear. Mr. Leung, please sit down. So I don't agree with the legal advisor.
Chairman, you were elected in the first meeting and you were authorized to implement the rules of procedure of the Finance Committee so you can make a decision. In our rules of procedure, we have empowered the chairman to make some decisions, and it is irrevocable. So if some people continue to struggle on the issue, you have the authority to handle their behavior. Mr. Yip Kok Hing, it's regrettable that we are at this state. All LegCo members' comments are broadcast live. The Hong Kong people can see that our behavior, and I feel very disappointed. Both sides need to consider how we need to comply with rules of procedure. The source of the problem is that Mr. Albert Chan, according to Clause 13 of the Finance Committee Rules of Procedure, he wants to see, he feels that this funding item should not be chaired by the chairman. It is very clear. So according to this, I heard Mr. Chairman Leung Sing in 13, if the chairman cannot chair the meeting, or if the members decide that he cannot be responsible for the meeting, then the vice chairman needs to convene the meeting. That's two things. So, chairman, if you decide that you can chair the meeting, that's one option. Or he does not wish to make a decision, he can hand it back to the Finance Committee for discussion. And now we have two options. So my understanding is that this decision now handed to us for our discussion. So we were going to discuss, but then some members said that you shouldn't even be chairing this session. Well, then the chairman said, let's put it to the vote. Can the chairman chair this session and deal with the upcoming Mr. Albert Chan's motion? You feel that he's appropriate, then he can chair the meeting, or otherwise. So if we feel that he's suitable, then he will continue to handle Mr. Albert Chan's motion. But if it's voted down, then the vice chairman will take over. Why do we need to struggle? Some people are calling for long discussions. Mr. James Tin had stated very clearly, it's just a judgment call whether you think he's suitable to chair this session of handling Mr. Albert Chan's motion. Well, I feel at this point this is a simple question. Let's have a vote. Either you agree or disagree whether the chairman should continue chairing the meeting. That's it. We still have 7 speakers. We've heard different views. We've had a reasonable discussion, so we should return back to handle Mr. Albert Chan's motion. So I'll now hand it back to you. I'll revert back to old practice, to draw a line, and and then we'll move on to the next step. So if you want to speak, this is your last chance, and we'll draw a line here on this topic. Next, could you read out who is going to speak? Tan Ji-chun, Michael Tian, James To, Emily Lau, Wang Dengkong, Albert Chan. There is no second round, and we have Lam Dai Phai and Helena Wong. Well, I don't want to spend too much time on this topic. Next, Mr. Tan Ji-chun. Thank you, Chairman. Your last decision was correct. Hand it back to the council to decide, but your error was in calling for an immediate vote. The debate now is that under any circumstances, before a vote, there should be a discussion. We are now arguing about Mr. Albert Chan's provisional motion, whether it can be discussed. And the end result is that you should have handed it back to the council and allow discussion. So we have now spent more time. And second, in this process, Chairman, you understand that you are not appropriate to continue to chair this meeting. So when we get to Mr. Albert Chan's proper motion, I will ask, whether you had handled the matter inappropriately, and whether Mr. Albert Chan needs to apologize. So when we enter his proper motion, coming back to this issue, so you should just allow Miss Emily Lau to fill in your shoes, and you should have done so last week. We are now in the midst of discussion, and ultimately it needs to be put to the vote. But I think colleagues should support Mr. Albert Chan. That is the most efficient way. Mr. James To, my thinking is similar to Tan Ji-chun. I do not wish to offend the chairman, but if your declaration of interest and you're appropriate to chair the Finance Committee meeting, well, you could allow Miss Emily Lau to chair the meeting. A lot of colleagues have provided their views, and that should help clarify the matter. Now, some people say that if we're going to discuss these rules of procedure, whether they are fair and whether there's conflict of interest, that's an important rule of the council. Well, if some people have no regard for conflict of interest, they can support all kinds of events. So if you think that conflict of interest is not important, then you'll think nothing is important. We haven't discussed whether there is any conflict of interest. Well, conflict of interest should include whether you should continue chairing this discussion. Well, I'm saying, Chairman, you are handling a whole set of discussions derivative of Mr. Chan's motion. Well, I'm telling you similarly that it's not clear yet. I think I can speak. I have the right to speak, Chairman. You have conflict of interest, even in the original motion, and in this discussion, there might be conflict of interest. Next, Ms. Emily Lau. As you said just now, the public are viewing a live broadcast, and we have people in the public gallery, we have students here. We shouldn't convert the Finance Committee into a farce. That's why some legislators express disappointment. I wonder what the officials are thinking. Chairman, I hope you respect the rules of procedure. You shouldn't be debating with speakers. The chairman, sometimes, well, the chairman will stop speakers from debating amongst themselves. But if you look back at the recording, you'll find that you have been interjecting. You should revise. You should look at the rules of procedure. You should look at the Finance Committee procedures. You should listen to the Secretary and legal advisor. Nobody in LegCo, whether it's the FC, we don't want any chairman to lose face. It's not beneficial to the council, but some people make a fool of themselves. So if there is a motion, you should allow people to discuss. And this is such a simple issue, and you've spent 20-30 minutes on it. So how can you generate confidence amongst colleagues? Well, you should learn from this lesson, and you should be more efficient, and you should be proficient in the rules of procedure, so that we don't hang our heads in shame. Mr. Wong Ting Kong. We seem to run into these kind of problems more and more frequently now, as the chairman, if he can disclose his interests, I think the colleagues present and the general public would be aware of his stance in the meeting. And chairing meetings usually don't vote. So as long as there is a declaration of interest mechanism, it should be sufficient. Legislators and the public can think for themselves, but these challenging tactics are occurring in all meetings. A lot of panels in LegCo, a lot of bills, committees in LegCo. We invite professional legislators to chair the meetings so the meetings can proceed smoothly. But if you use this logic, if you apply this logic, according to Albert Chan, all these meetings have to be they cannot be held. If they live in the new territories, they can't chair development panel meetings dealing with new territories. No, we're serving the public. It's a farce. general public, the legislators, they should think about what they're doing. Are you serving the public? Or are you just stirring up trouble? Albert Chan? Well, a lot of people are here to seek benefits. Well, you allowed him to talk about a farce and a public interest. Well, this indicates that you're not neutral. He was digressing and you didn't stop him. And when I talk about interest, well, maybe it's because you are guilty, so you immediately want to divert my speech. Well, take a look. Just now, Mr. Wang Dinggong's speech and my speech, they are 99% similar, but the chairman's treatment is different. We're talking about interest. You recall Zhang Binglong, when he appointed Lei Chok-fan, the ex-Hong Kong U Vice Chancellor, he had not realized that his company had participated in engineering works, and that led to a conflict of interest. And then the media asked him, and he resigned from that appointment. So you'll see that sometimes it's not a matter of whether you think there's interest. People will trust Lei Chok-fan because of his non-executive director status, being involved in engineering, and it will lead to a conflict of interest. But he would rather resign as the head of the inquiry chief on the MTR delays. So, Chairman, you have instructed whether we should continue this. No, that is a ridiculous instruction. Any motion, unless there's a rule of procedure, because if you refer Robert's rules or SUBCOMMITTee on some motions, there are some that do not need discussion. Some need discussion. There's this different category. There are different instructions. Unless you designate certain, no discussions are needed, and an immediate vote be taken.
Then, for those items, there won't be any discussion. Yeah, that is the case for some items. Well, I asked you to use your free time to understand the rules, regulations under the rules of procedure and the reasons behind, because we're talking about experience over hundreds of years before these rules are put in place. So the principles and values are very important. You should not just do it according to your whim. If you want to discuss it, then let's have a discussions. Otherwise, no. Mr. Lam Tai Fai, a number of members have spoken. I really appreciate what Mr. Ip Kok Kim said. He said he finds it regrettable. Members have been speaking as if they are having a chat, and this is embarrassing. That's why I advise Chairman Yu to have a break for coordination. And it's not something that has never been done before, and very often it's very effective. However, Chairman, you've been quite stubborn, and you refuse to take my advice, and that's why I find it very regrettable. And as to whether this motion of Mr. Chan should be dealt with by the Deputy Chairman, well, I do think, Chairman, your performance is different from your usual performance. This afternoon, we see that your emotion has gone through a roller coaster. Well, I'm the chairman of the panel of education, and I've been commended for doing a good job. See, people applaud me. Let me finish. Before I decide whether to support this motion, I would like to ask you, Mr. Ng, can you first control your emotion keep your temper in check. Do not interrupt. Can you take a deep breath? Calm yourself down. Collect yourself. Tell us that you will be your usual self. You will not get angry. You will compose yourself. You will not interrupt. Otherwise, if you continue, loyalists won't support you for fear that you will make a mistake. Mr. Ng, I now give you a chance to interrupt. Okay, I'll do it once. I am the chairman. I have to abide by a principle that when I'm right, I'm right. Helena Wong. I think apart from God, no one else can say that. Mr. Lam Tai Fai said that, well, your performance is different from usual ones. I think that, yes, I think your performance is just like your usual performance, just as poor. You're embarrassing yourself. And on top of that, you get in the way of other agenda items for funding allocation. And I think the loyalists are to blame because they are the ones who vote for you to be the chairman. I don't know how we can continue this meeting. Do we have to move a motion of no confidence? Or, Chairman, you consider stepping down? Ask the loyalists to select someone who has good performance, who will not interrupt, to chair the meeting. Perhaps Mr. Lam Tai Fai, you can come forward. Well, now, I do think that anyone who is suspected to have conflict of interest should not chair the meeting. Thank you all for participating in the discussion. I now put the motion on the screen to a vote. Shall we do it by division? Mr. Abuchen calls for a division. You would like to speak? Let me say once again, you will find this motion on the screen. You've all read it and are clear about it. It will be put to a vote. Is the division bell being rung? The bell won't ring? Is broken?
Oh, okay. Okay. 各位
Well, voting begins. The division bell has been rung. Voting begins.
我現在宣布表決之前呢，請各位核對所作嘅表決。現在停止表決。
I ask members to check their votes. Voting stops. The result displayed. 59 members present, 22 for, 32 against, and 4 abstain. I declare this motion negatived. Now, we will deal with Mr. Albert Chan's motion. Each member will have 3 minutes. Please press the press to speak button. It's best that we can finish this part and finish at 5 o'clock. If we can't, we can extend it by 15 minutes. Please press the request to speak button. First, Mr. Albert Chan. I think you can ask you can release the government officials. Let's not waste their time. I don't think we can start discussion on the agenda item before 5 o'clock. And I thank them for watching the best debate in the history of the LegCo. Well, if there is such a rule, I will do it accordingly, but so far there is no such rule, so I'm not going to do it. The clerk will remind me about the arrangement. Let the Secretariat make the arrangements with the officials. First, Mr. Albert Chan. I move this motion to ensure that the committees of the LegCo is to be seen to be fair, and matters are dealt with without any involvement of interests. Of course, the chairman has declared his interest, but sometimes the public will have to see that something is not done in a different way because of that person's capacity, because the relationship of consortium, political parties, individuals, that is very important. Well, sometimes a painting will cost you 13 million. Will let you have $13 million, and there is also the Lion and Dragon Dance Extravaganza, and we're talking about Smart Tone. Well, you get honorarium. I know that the honorarium is a lot less than other companies. See, Mr. Abraham Sheikh received $500,000 or $600,000 as honorarium. I don't know why you accept that post. Well, point of order.
What matter of order? He's used my name that it's irrelevant to this topic. Please continue. Well, I always tell people to familiarize themselves with the procedure. Well, some people are learned but not reasonable. Some people say, when should we have dinner? So I pointed out that Smart Tone and Sun Hongdae have interest. Sun Hongdae has 66% of Smart Tone, and Sun Hongdae in NT Northeast have a large land bank. And if today's motion, if it were endorsed, then people would feel a development. I always criticize the Gudong development of being a program for the Cheonggong. So the NT East relationship with the consortiums, it's very complicated. So in order to have the public feel that when the committee is discussing, then we need people, it has to be seen to be neutral. So chairman, being a Smart Tone non-executive director, and when you were elected as Smart Tone non-executive director, it was because you were given the votes by Sun Hung Gai. Sun Hung Gai has 700 million shares, and in the voting, the 700 million votes were given to you. You had received the directorship of Smart Tone because of Sun Hung Gai's sponsorship. So if you were to continue to chairman, it would be seen as unfair and unjust. Next, Mr. Martin Liao. Mr. Albert Chan's motion that the Finance Committee, in scrutinizing the NTNE's design and surveying funds, and Mr. Mnosing as chairman, there is a suspected conflict of interest, and he's querying whether you can chair the meeting fairly and justly. And according to the following points, I'm against this. I oppose this motion. Is there any conflict of interest for a person chairing the meeting, chairman yourself? Of course, that is a serious problem, and it is of concern, and it should be a matter of concern. But the issues, are there really conflicts of interest? Should there be disclosure? Should you continue to chair the meeting? Well, nobody can be more clear than chairman yourself, and nobody can make a decision on your behalf. It is the responsibility of members, and members need to be responsible and accountable for their actions. That is an important principle. Second, Leung Sing has already made disclosure. There is no obvious or potential conflict of interest. He is a non-executive director of a listed company. That is, there is no contradiction in being a electrical member. As FC chairman, that's also in line with this rule procedure section 13. He is also director of two listed companies, and these two listed companies are engaged in different businesses. Smart Tone provides telecommunication services. Their work is not related to real estate. Sun Hung Gai is involved in real estate, and they do not interfere with telecommunications business. And Mr. Mnosing, as a non-executive director of Smart Tone, there is no responsibility or accountability regarding the major shareholder, Sun Hung Gai. This motion has not provided any evidence, but is questioning the appropriateness and fairness of the chairman's neutrality. Well, these are exaggerated descriptions. You cannot take these words at their face value. And saying that Mr. Mnosing had the sponsorship of Sun Hung Gai in order to become non-executive director of Smart Tone, I said that we need proof. Well, having the majority shareholder support doesn't mean that Mr. Mnosing had the votes from Sun Hung Gai to become non-executive director of Smart Tone. Next, Mr. Leung Ko-hong. Well, Chairman, it's very simple. You've made some improvements. You said that you have no problems and you can continue. And today you said we will let you discuss. I've disclosed interests, and you can decide whether I can continue chairing the meeting. You are willing to face the challenge. Now I'm challenging you. Our colleague, Mr. Martin Liao, spoke very well. We can't prove that we're just suspecting that there's conflict of interest. Well, Mr. Martin Liao said that the two companies have different businesses, And how can they be mentioned together? Well, Sun Hongge is a majority shareholder of SmartTone, and they support you to become non-executive director. Well, are you related? Yes. There's an interest. It's just a matter of degree. Second, you're also MTR non-executive director, but you need to bear in mind that there's a controversy in the Gudong station. Should MTR build a station there and displace people there? And they also receive land rights. That's the case with the RL. Mr. Paul Chan asked the MTR to return some sites. And third, you're also senior management in Bank of China. And the 4 real estate companies in the NTN East, they do business with Bank of China. So I believe it's better that you not serve as FC chairman. I think Mr. Martinello is incorrect. If you don't serve as FC chairman, and if the NTN East works out smoothly, then it proves my point. So whether a person is ethical or not, he needs to comply with the ethics first. So if you are ethical, and in the face of an ethical question, if you cannot abide by your own principles, then you're not impartial. So I think it's best that you not serve as FC chairman. And I also understand why Zhang Yoxing is chairman, because he has no interest. So we never, so aside from his communist status, we don't criticize him. Chairman, on the last session you ruled that you had no conflict of interest, and that's why you continue to chair the meeting. That is inappropriate. On this occasion, we are voting on this issue. I think it's necessary. Just now Mr. Martindale said handling conflict of interest, nobody can be clearer than the person himself. So complying with ethical rules is important, but this is the LegCo. LegCo is accountable to the public. So when handling conflict of interest, it's not just a matter of deciding there is no conflict and disclosure is sufficient. In official postings, in officialdom, aside from no obvious pecuniary interest, the public also needs to see that there is no direct conflict of interest. That is the best method. So there are some people who say that accountable officials need to be whiter than white. It means they need to be perceived, not just in action. They need to be perceived as impartial as well. So as Mr. Leung Kwok-hong pointed out, Chairman, you're a SmartTone director, you have reimbursement. You're also non-executive director in MTR. You also receive remuneration. The MTR in the Gudong station, in this motion, there is direct interest, and there is direct relationship to your status. So on these 2 points alone, I feel there is direct pecuniary interest. In addition, you also have other roles. In the Bank of China, you are senior management. The 4 major real estate, Sun Hongge, Changgong, New World, also have significant business dealings with Bank of China. So in your different roles, some have direct pecuniary interest, some not. So whether direct or indirect, I think in fact in discussing the NTN East Northeast development, there is direct and indirect conflict of interest, so you shouldn't chair the meeting. Next, Mr. Kenneth Lau, Chairman, you had some exchange and debate with Mr. Albachan, and I was present. Mr. Albachan and Chairman, you had asked for my opinion, so I'll do so right now. The conflict of interest, there are 6 types. And rules of procedure, it covers direct, indirect, pecuniary interests. And what there are non-pecuniary conflict of interest, real conflict of interest, and perceived conflict of interest. So we need to handle these 6 types. So if you summarize them, there are some 20 different combinations. So it's quite complex. So if a person has more than one hat, and when he wears another hat and it affects his other hat's decision, so when you are the smart tone non-executive director, if that affects you chairing the FC meeting, especially when dealing with NTN Northeast funding, then we hope that you defer to another colleague. This is something that we need to discuss. So, using my legal or professional perspective, Sun Hong Kei is a majority shareholder of Smart Tone, 64.3%, about 680 million shares. Of course, they are the majority shareholder, and Smart Tone is a subsidiary of Sun Hong Kei. So I don't know what your remuneration is. There is some disclosure. I think it's about 20,000, but your remuneration from LegCo is 80,000. So I don't see direct pecuniary interest. I don't see a direct conflict of interest, because there's a difference between 80,000 and 20,000. And I don't think a senior banker, you wouldn't make any unjust decisions for just $20,000. But given that, I feel Smart Tone business is in the telecommunications field. The Sun Hong Kei is in the real estate business. Let me quote a case, a 1999 case. The appeal court said that even though the two companies are the same subsidiaries of the same company, we shouldn't confuse them. I need a second round. I'm finished. We've only arranged for one round. Next, Mr. James Tian, Chairman. I've looked at the contents of the motion, and I will speak according to these contents. Mr. Albachan thinks that you're a non-executive director of Smart Tone, and Sun Hong Kei owns 66% of Smart Tone. Sun Hong Kei is one of the developers in Gudong. They have a land bank there, so therefore you shouldn't be chairman of the FC.
Well, along this line, I myself do a lot of investments, but here the Bank of China is not mentioned. Bank of China giving loans to Sun Hong Kei, which is a developer. Well, I do think that this is quite common. But if you yourself own a piece of land there, yes, there will be conflicts. But if I buy shares of the HSBC give loans to the 4 developers, does it mean that all shareholders, including, I guess, a lot of the Democrats, should not participate in the meeting? And I think the most direct way is to ask yourself whether you own any land there. And that will be a direct conflict of interest. Indirect, well, what if you hold a lot of Sun Hung Kai shares? I don't know, I have to check. Does any of you own shares of the Sun Hung Kai? It's not just Sun Hung Kai. There are other 3 developers as well, and many banks are involved. And if that is so extensive, then in relation to conflict of interest, it won't be extended that far. We will only be looking at direct conflict of interest. And Chairman, you can continue to chair the meeting. And actually, you do not gain anything because you cannot cast a vote. What role do you play to help Sun Hung Kai or SmartTone to gain in this project? Next, Mr. Christopher Zhang. I remember on the 2nd of May, 2 weeks ago, there was a finance committee meeting. There was a discussion about conflict of interest and whether you should be excused. And at that time, Mr. Gary Fan's motion to adjourn the discussion of the NTNE project has been vetoed. Today we rake up the same thing. Is it a waste of time? Mr. Albert Chan's motion, on the face of it, is a new one. But it's the same thing in a different package. It's still about conflict of interest. We should not spend a long time discussing this because this point has been thoroughly discussed last time. I hope that this should be put to a vote straight away. There should not be any delay because the delays will hurt the public and the government. Miss Claudia Mo, when it comes to conflict of interest, what jumps to your mind is pecuniary interest. You can't say that, well, do you have any proof that there is hard cash and services exchanged? When it comes to collusion between the government and the business sector, what people are concerned is deferred interest. It's difficult to see, it's intangible, and it's difficult to tell what that interest will be. And if you say, well, you're an NED of SmartTone, which is a telecommunication company, and Sun Hung Kai is a developer, and the two are completely unrelated. Well, Hong Kong is a small place. You can't say that the parent company is totally unrelated to the subsidiary. Mr. James Tian said that if everything that is remotely involved should be counted, and that will be trouble. Well, if you talk about, say, HSBC, I hold shares, and if you talk about China Light and Power, someone holds shares, make a declaration. But now, Chairman, your role is challenged severely. Politics is perception. You can't say, oh, this is me, accept me. But it's only what you've said about yourself. You are the judge of yourself. But it means that you're like a judge in the court. But are you really in the same place as a judge? You have to be whiter than white, because politics is about perception. I think you should just release yourself. Maybe you're doing it because you think you will lose face if you step down, or you think that you should not. We're wasting a lot of time. If at 3 o'clock you say, well, let's talk about this, then we would have voted on it a long time ago. But you insisted. The clerk said that there should be discussion, and obviously the legal advisor thinks the same, although he cannot openly oppose to what you said. And then we spend time on discussing whether this should be discussed. You have turned this into a farce. Next, Ms. Helena Wong. I support Mr. Albert Chan's motion. You should not chair this item. And you said repeatedly that you're not involved in any interest, so you can chair the meeting. I believe that after these two meetings, we see that it's all over the place. We talk about XRL, we talk about cavities, we talk about boulders. We can't get to the point. We want our chairman to be impartial and should be seen by the public as impartial. And now the public think you are suspected to have a conflict of interest. So people can't perceive as you being fair in conducting business. And if you still insist, we will not be able to deal with this. I suggest that you should not chair this item. And then we will find another person to chair the meeting. And hopefully that person will not have any suspected or actual conflict of interest. Mr. Gary Fan, I speak in support of Mr. Chan's motion. I ask Mr. Ng you to step down and not be the chairman of this item, because indeed there is potential and obvious and serious conflict of interest. We are very serious when it comes to the exercise of public power, because members of the public are involved. The government has set an example. 3 people are involved. 3 people are appointed in the independent expert panel to look into the XRL delay. 2 of them are overseas experts, because this shows this is done to show that the independent expert panel is independent. Mr. Ng, you are an NED of SmartTone, which is a subsidiary of Sun Hung Kai. We're talking about 3 tiers of conflict of interest. First, you're at the NED of the SmartTone. 2, it's not the case that you hold shares of the Bank of China. You are in the senior management of Bank of China. You are in this trust. You're the head of director of the trust, and other things as well. And if someone hold land in NTNE, in the exchange of land with the government, the developers will benefit from it. So there is conflict of interest. And the 3rd tier, as I say again, you are an NED of the MTRCL. Every year you receive honorarium. And obviously, the NTNE railway service is commissioned. A lot of people will use the service and rely on the service, on the railway service. So how is it not conflict of interest? And in the construction of the Lok Ma Chau spur line, the administration exercised a right to acquire land, and land in Kutong North will be acquired to construct an MTR station. And residents over there, after the development, will have to use the railway service. How is it not conflict of interest? So I asked the loyalists to reconsider. It may backfire if you insist, and it will drag the project through the mud. And this project itself is controversial. So, Chairman, would you want to cause more questions, challenges, and criticism because you want to chair this meeting? when there is suspected conflict of interest? Mr. Lee Choi-yen, we all know, Chairman, that you don't have land in Kutong North, Fanling North. But when it comes to your relationship with Sun Hung Kai, it's glaringly clear. Maybe it's a problem of FC members. A lot of FC members are entangled in a web of relationship with many different companies. And people see LegCo as a gravy train. All the spokesmen of conglomerates are here. But we're not talking about the constitutional affairs here. I think you are just a result of constitutional structure. Just like a lot of FC members, functional constituency members. You are a paid director of SmarTone, which is a subsidiary of Sun Hung Kai. We see that the Kutong North development, the government will acquire land from. Will acquire land for developers, not just for PRH development. You are a director of a conglomerate, so you can't say that you're not related. I don't know how many meals you've had with Sun Hung Kai, and we don't know what was discussed when you're appointed a director. And now we have this new term, deferred interests or deferred benefit. Let me coin another one. Well, a lot of things go unsaid. You make it out like we believe in conspiracy theories. But we're talking about deferred interest and tacit understanding or agreement. If there is reasonable doubt or reasonable suspicion, and you continue to chair the meeting, the public will think that you affect the image of the LegCo as well. Because the LegCo is supposed to be neutral, and if because of the chairman's capacity, its relationship with a conglomerate, LegCo is not seen to be neutral. It's a good job we still have the rules of procedure, and sometimes we can monitor the work. But I don't know when you will come out to say, well, 5 minutes reduced to 3, and then it's reduced to 2, and then it's reduced to 1, and then members are not supposed to ask, banned from asking any more questions. I don't know when you will exercise that right, so you should not be the chairman. Mr. Ray Chan, I'd like to respond to what Christopher Zhang said. Last time on the 2nd of May, we only dealt with the German motion of Mr. Gary Fan. We did not deal anything about the chairman's suspected conflict of interest and members' request for him to excuse himself and not be the chairman.
I did. The last FC meeting, I had suggested in writing a motion similar in meaning, 90% similar in content motion to Mr. Albert Chan's. And I remember Helena Wong said she wanted to take a look at it, but the chairman did not print it out, and I was not allowed to read it out. But why you are handling Mr. Albert Chan's motion? Whether you support this motion or not, that's something else. Why can you handle Mr. Albert Chan's motion but not mine? Is it because he's loud? He's more vociferous, easier to bully? Are there double standards? Well, if there are double standards, you can't answer my question today. Why you didn't handle my motion? Why are you handling Albert Chan's? It was out of good intentions. I wanted chairman to consider this. If you had to handle that, then today we could continue a smooth meeting. Second, chairman, you said you don't have a right to vote. You have a smaller right. Well, you're trying to confuse people. Of course, the chairman role is more important than the voting right. the chairman's rights. He can control the number of speakers. Can rule on the speaking time, what is relevant, what is not relevant. You can review the tapes. He's a government spokesperson. He's in response to legislators' questions. He can even explain the government's response. We have proof. So how can I, even if there's no conflict of interest, just your conduct alone, I feel that you're inappropriate. I don't know what is not being disclosed. Or are you just intent on supporting the government? That is not fair in itself. So, if you complied with my suggestion, then you wouldn't have today's outcome. And if you will speak, you need to give me a response. Why you not only not handled my motion, you didn't give an explanation before the next speaker. The secretary will respond to you. Next, Mr. Wu Jiwai. Well, according to Rules of Procedure 84, if you have direct pecuniary interest, there is a way to handle that. It's actually very clear. Chairman, if you had declared and if you comply with procedure when there are suspicions, you had a discussion and a vote and continue to chair the meeting, that would have concluded the issue. But on the last meeting, you ruled that you had no problem and you continued the discussion. You did not handle Mr. Tan Ji-chun's motion, and today you did not discuss this issue. So it indicates that, Chairman, when you encounter a conflict of interest, you have not fully utilized the rules of procedure. You have not respected the procedures and make a decision and arrangement. So on this point, in this controversial NTNE discussion, you are not suitable you're not a suitable person to chair this discussion. It would lead to more obstructions, and I would like you to learn from this experience. You should conduct full disclosure, and if colleagues question that, then the chairing function should be decided by members. I think that would be the most fair way to handle the situation, and you can display to the public that you are acting impartially, and you can also demonstrate that you can provide a suitable arrangement and retain our dignity. Miss Emily Lau, well, the whole meeting, as Mr. Ip Kok Kim said, it's regrettable. We have officials here for 2 hours. I don't know how much money and time we're wasting, officials' time and money. Your handling, even Mr. Lam Dai-fai finds you insufferable. Well, you should be a bit, you should be humble, you should listen to your colleagues. Well, of course not Mr. Tagamlang. Listen to the secretary and even the government. I think the government is frustrated. It's already a mess and you're just adding to the mess. Not just the FC, any committee chairman in the LegCo it's an important role. Our authority is demonstrated through the impartial chairing of meetings, especially when we have complex issues. They need to be They need to handle these issues professionally, competently, and impartially. You're not of that standard. And when there are queries and doubts, as some members have stated, it's a matter of perception. You don't need us to remind you that the public feel that real estate companies are benefiting from government policies. So if the government is putting forward a large project and seeking funding, a lot of people are sensitive and agitated. So whether real estate developers or banks, they're involved in this. I have been FC chairman, and it's an influential role. You're not necessarily bulldozing over colleagues, but you are definitely strong-willed, but you need to give your colleagues a fair chance of expressing opinion. You need to, and now we're in this conundrum. I think according to Rule 13, you should resign. Well, we now have 4 speakers, and we only have 7 minutes remaining, so we need to extend another 15 minutes if you don't object. We now have 6 speakers, so you can utilize the time and we can extend to 5:15. Mr. Leung Yu-zhong, after we speak, will you conclude the meeting? If that is the case, we won't be able to discuss the North NTNE, so we might as well release the officials. By keeping them here, you're wasting taxpayers' money. It's not worth doing so. I'd allow you the time to make that decision. Please continue. You're not going to rule? I already notified that if they need to leave, we won't stop them. You didn't say that. You were saying you're giving people the assumption that you'll continue to discuss NTNE. Well, if that's the case, let me tell the officials that you can leave. You don't waste your time here listening to something that is relevant to your work. So, coming back to what I want to say, the conflict of interest, as a lot of colleagues have said, there's direct pecuniary, indirect pecuniary, there's deferred interest, there's pecuniary issues, non-financial issues, there's a lot. And Mr. Kenneth Leung wants to speak, so I would like to dedicate my time. Well, you were only given 3 minutes each. And the last time you said you had no conflict of interest, and you insisted on chairing the meeting. But I don't have a lot of experience, but I think the lawyers have a lot of experience. A lot of criminals say they are innocent, but after they rule it, they can still be convicted. So you're saying you don't have conflict of interest. It's not equivalent to that you don't have a conflict of interest. Well, we don't have a judge in the council, but some people say these are personal matters of personal accountability. But Chairman, your image as Chairman, it casts a shadow, and when we're talking about business-government collusion, why aren't you sensitive? And you should help us, help the council, and help the SAR government. You shouldn't promote the image of government-business collusion. Why don't you help society? And we are aware that this incident has significant impact. There are deep-seated connections, and why aren't you sensitive to these issues? Mr. Albert Ho, Chairman. Just now, Mr. Martindale said, nobody can be clearer than the Chairman himself whether there's conflict of interest. So, Chairman, you were worried. Otherwise, you wouldn't be the first person to declare you had a relationship with a certain company. We never thought about what we needed to disclose. At least, Chairman, you were worried enough. Otherwise, you wouldn't disclose that. So, if there is conflict of interest, then of course it's a matter of extent. But if there is conflict of interest, then disclosure doesn't resolve it. That's why Mr. Martin, that's why when Mr. Martin said that by disclosure that resolves it, that I don't understand that. In a interest relationship, you cannot make a clear judgment because you might be tempted by this interest and lose impartiality. So even if you can exercise constraint, people feel that you won't be able to exercise constraint. So when there's conflict of interest, you not only need to disclose it, you need to avoid it. So what is this conflict? I feel in order to maintain justice, it should not be too narrow. If it's too narrow, it defeats the purpose of perceived impartiality. So we not only look at direct conflict of interest, we also look at indirect conflict. We also look at whether there is real and potential conflict. And third, we also have to see whether there is perceived conflict of interest. In light of these considerations, the directorships you serve and as your own senior management role in BOC, you give people the impression there is potential conflict, there is perceived conflict, and there's suspected conflict. So why do you allow people to question you? A lot of people will trust you, will believe you can exercise constraint, but if people are uncomfortable, if there is a perceived problem, if there's such a doubt, and if someone else can take over the role as chairman, then why do you insist on chairing the meeting? So I sincerely hope that you can reconsider. Mr. Fong Kim Kei. A lot of colleagues have spoken on similar topics, and I want to say that in social welfare panel we are concerned about the Dill's Corner, and we are, and you are a non-executive director of MTR, and you would hold meetings with MTR staff, and that is a cause of concern. Is this a Dill's Corner relocation?
Well, I'm going to go into details when there is actual discussion. When they talk about relocating the elderly people by phases, there is a problem, a huge problem, because we're talking about inmates in RCHGs and the workers. And you are in the senior management of the Bank of China. Banks will have a lot of deals and dealings with developers. I believe that all developers in NTNE will go to banks, and the relationship or all the dealings between developers and the Bank of China are set out in the annual reports. Declaration itself is not enough, because the suspicion, the perception is still there. It won't disappear simply because you have declared. And how can you ensure that whatever you do will not be seen as partial? The only way is for you to not share the item. The clerk reminds me that if we want to deal with this, well, there are still 3 members who would like to speak. If they don't speak, then we can have the time to put this to a vote, because we still need to give 2 minutes to Mr. Albert Chan to speak. If these members don't speak, then we will have time to do that. I have pressed the request to speak button. And I know that's why I asked you. Maybe a shorter time. Mr. Kim. Sorry. It's a point of order. Well, apart from asking the 3 members who've been waiting to speak for the first time, I hope the chairman will ask members who would like to speak for the second time. I've asked the Secretariat for this kind of discussion. There can only be 1 round, 3 minutes. That's why I've reminded you all. What do you mean this kind? I'm new. I don't know. Clerk, would you please elaborate? When it comes to moving of motions, in the notice served to members are informed that they can only speak once. Mr. Kim, thank you. Well, all the things are in the rules of procedure. Well, there are many different types of conflict of interest: direct, indirect, perceived ones. You're a staff member in a bank. Well, there may be interest, and so do lawyers. Well, if the coverage is so wide, no one will be able to vote. This is unfounded and unwarranted. If you expand it so much, we have the rules of procedure. We have to stick to rules of procedure, rules 83A and 84. It's stated very clearly that members will have to abide by that. Where there are interests, you will have to make a declaration, and you're responsible for the declaration. Mr. Lee, I agree that it has to be done in accordance with the rules of procedure. Chairman, just like any other members, you should make a declaration in accordance with the rules of procedure. Where there are no pecuniary interests, all it needs is the disclosure. Some members pointed out that you occupied a senior position in the BOC. But this is only a potential pecuniary interest, and this, according to the ROP, is dealt with by disclosure. Lawyers will also have dealings with developers. Developers will also engage architects, accountants, IT companies. And if that is the case, there are many different trades that will be involved. So I do think that the declaration of direct or indirect pecuniary interest suffices. Mr. M. Tai Fai. Well, whether it's for chairman or deputy chairman to chair a meeting, whether it is a FC, House Committee, panel, subcommittees, well, they are monitored by different parties. The chairman will have to remind himself that he will have to be objective, fair, just, impartial. Other than on top of that, he's also bound by the rules of procedure. The chairman cannot act beyond the rules of procedure. We have a high transparency in the LegCo. The public, organizations and political parties monitor the chairman. So the chairman and the deputy chairman cannot do whatever they want. That is very important. Well, after making a declaration of interest, the chairman and the deputy chairman is subject to monitoring. And as I said, that you should calm yourself. You should not interrupt. You should not lose your temper. And I think you have done really well. You have met the minimum requirement of a chairman. Well, I run a school, and I am the chairman of the panel of education. After I've made a declaration, political parties don't doubt that I occupy the position as a chairman to further the interest of my school. The most important thing is that I act in accordance with the rules of procedure, and the public, the press, and other members will monitor you. We will monitor the chairman for you to do your work. And if you maintain your performance like you did just now, I will support you as a chairman. Mr. Albert Chan, you have 2 minutes. Well, as to whether there is a conflict of interest, it's not about what you think. Monitoring in Hong Kong is weak. If you're a directly elected member, you in overseas countries, you will have to put your businesses to a trust. But there is no such requirements in Hong Kong. So in this regard, the requirements here is more lax than other countries. Just like Paul Chan, the secretary who hoard land and who runs business that runs subdivided flats. Well, there may not be any conflict of interest, but people are angry. You make a huge profit, and while other people lose their home, people will be very angry. There are a lot of people listening to this meeting. They strongly object to the anti-NE development. And if you, chairman, is related to Sun Hung Kai, then you're only giving ammunition to the public to be against this project. And in the future, you're only adding oil to fire. You give them more reason to be angry. I don't think the loyalists are so stupid that you will just give us the ammunition to attack you. You should just clear the mind for yourself. But now, every time they go to districts, people will say that Paul Chan, you have the subdivided flats. Leung Sing, you have conflict of interest. When there is conflict of interest, you are giving ammunition to the public to attack you. You have to be very careful about that, because everything big starts with something small. Well, you said that there will be a ruling about what I said, but I haven't got it because this may sway my vote. In short, what the clerk's view is that last time it was under 37A. It wasn't directly related. That's why it wasn't dealt with. Now we have 5 minutes. With your consent, this will... Division. I call for division. But it will be beyond 15 minutes. Will it still be valid? No. It will be over the 15 minutes, and this will go against the rules of procedure. There may not be enough time according to the clock of the Secretariat. Well, I will give a brief reply and then we will make arrangements as to how this is to be dealt with. Mr. Albert Chan, you have made a concluding remark, and my reply is that all the views expressed are about conflict of interest, and I will give a brief account. This is about conflict of interest. Under the rules of procedure 83A and 84, just like other members, I have dealt with this properly. If we keep using conflict of interest as the reason, this will be something encountered by all members. But I think that in a court, if it's dealt with under 83A and 84, and if the chairman thinks that it should be handed to someone else, the chair is handed to someone else under point 13, that so be it. And I say that well, this will be dealt with in accordance with the rules of procedure. I don't want the continuity here, that this will become a precedent. I thank a lot of members for their advice. Well, if it can be avoided, I will do my best to avoid it. Because of time, we have finished with our discussion. According to the Secretariat, we will put this to a vote next time, and the electoral meeting will resume after this.